Economics, economy. Where shall we start? With the word economy. Oikos, house. Nomos, law, rule, arrangement. The way we do things here that has emerged through time. Gives us, of course, two accounts of economics. One, economics is about the house and the household, its provisioning, but also how that household interacts with other communities. And so, with the great human predicament about how to meet and greet the other person from the other community with their other habits, and so the public square. So economics is about human interacting and exchange, and of course what resources we bring to that. That gives us an extra large definition of economics, but through all human history it hasn't been called economics, it's been called all sorts of things. Moral and political philosophy and ethics. The whole range of the humanities has dealt with this issue of how we interact and exchange and what resources we bring. So, name your favourites here. Plato, Aristotle, Augustine, Aquinas. These are economists. In some ways, of course, they do call themselves economists too, since they admit to they're discussing households and their resources and how communities deal with foreign communities and react to them. They might call it also management or husbandry or stewardship, but there is all political, philosophical, moral thought. A great long tradition. Let's say it stretches from Plato to, I don't know, name your 20th century favourite, John Maynard Keynes. A moral philosopher, and of course an economist. And there's another, but more reduced and more abbreviated version of economics. Look, economics is human interaction in a limited, a finite world in which there are only so many resources, and so we are dealing with scarcity. We have to be concerned and calculate that we're going to get enough. Now that smaller definition really began to exert itself not at the beginning of time, but just 200 years ago. Let's say the traditional beginning of economics as modern economics, 1776. Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations. That's the moment when economics decided to make itself independent from the whole long, fat tradition of moral and political thought, and to adopt a new, from-scratch foundation in which it shrugged off all previous questions and answers offered, and set out, as it saw it from first principles, to describe how humans come to their resources in a world of scarcity and thus of calculation. Now, Smith is part of a double act. Smith was a well-read philosopher, deeply imbued in Roman Stoic thought. And his great friend David Hume, also in Edinburgh, was a moral and political philosopher deeply impressed by the arguments of Epicureanism. And these two ancient metaphysics, let us say, allowed these two to decide that the long, big tradition of moral and economic thought could be dispensed with, and a much more abbreviated and reduced version of human interaction and exchange could be assembled, which would do the job better, because people wouldn't be arguing about metaphysics and culture all the time. They would be dealing with one another simply as individual agents with limited demands on one another. So then we have a compare and contrast exercise, don't we, between two conceptions of the economy and two forms of economics. The great long economics that stretched over thousands of years, let's say from Plato to now, and this shorter new republic of economics that's declared its independence from all other forms of thought that appeared just over 200 years ago and has now become the discipline we know as that name, the discipline that abrogates to itself such authority to describe how humans interact and exchange. That the next time I talk about this, I will compare the two views of human nature that these two forms of economics assume. And that makes for a very interesting contrast.